Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Thank you so much tuning in. I have a new guest host for the day. Nice to see you, Atiba Medjun. Welcome to Rising.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Where are you from?
I'm from Washington, D.C.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, it's good to be home.
Great.
But what's on your radar today?
Happy to tell you. All right, Amazon CEO and Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos made a startling announcement on Wednesday. The opinion pages of his newspaper will adopt a new editorial mission of defending, quote, two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. Isn't that my job? Indeed, if the new WAPO slogan sounds familiar, it's because it's remarkably similar to the tagline of Reason magazine, where I also work as a full-time editor. Reason has long described itself as the magazine of free minds and free markets. It's my personal mantra, so that's nice. The similarity was not lost on social media users, several of whom noted that Bezos would be bringing WAPO into ideological alignment with an already existing media brand. Another news outlet expressing an interest in promoting civil liberties and economic freedom? I say great, the more the merrier. Freedom, after all, does not suffer from a lack of enemies within the mainstream media. News coverage from a progressive and even ostensibly neutral bent often focuses on, say, the purported harms of making any cuts to bloated government. See, for instance, a recent news story in The Washington Post that explained how devastating staffing reductions mandated by the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, had made it impossible to unlock the public restrooms at Yosemite National Park. A news publication with a liberty-friendly mission, on the other hand, might have asked whether the government bureaucracy within the Parks Department was intentionally starting with the most painful cuts of all in order to sap public enthusiasm for the cause of limiting government, something I described yesterday as, quote, malicious compliance. Here's a refresher on that term. What if the federal bureaucracy, sensing a threat to its self-preservation, was making things as awful as possible in order to scare the American people into thinking government can only function if it is vast and unaccountable? We actually have a term for this. It's called malicious compliance. It's when someone follows a new rule so closely without applying common sense such that they ultimately work against the rule's stated purpose deliberately. Point me. But back to Bezos. It's important to note that this declaration only pertains to the paper's opinion pages. News coverage will remain unchanged. Still, the new mandate for the opinion section is significant and has already resulted in the departure of opinion editor David Shipley. Bezos explained in a memo to staff, "I offered David Shipley, whom I greatly admire, the opportunity to lead this new chapter. I suggested to him that if the answer wasn't hell yes, then it had to be a no. After careful consideration, David decided to step away. This is a significant shift. Won't be easy. It will require 100% commitment. I respect his decision. We'll be searching for a new opinion editor to own this new direction." Bezos made clear, however, it's full steam ahead. He said, "I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current marketplace of ideas and news opinion. I'm excited for us together to fill that void." Critics of the move perceived it to be an incursion into the newspaper's editorial autonomy, though Bezos is the owner, of course, and is ultimately well within his rights to direct coverage however he sees fit. Additionally, there's a political valence to all of this. Bezos attended President Donald Trump's inauguration alongside other tech CEOs like Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Google's Sundar Pichai, Apple's Tim Cook, and the perception is that the tech world has come to tolerate Trump, if not embrace him outright. Cynics will undoubtedly read Bezos' new mandate as an implicit pivot to the right. Well, it's not true that defending personal liberties and free markets necessitates joining MAGA or the Republican Party. Many of Trump's economic proposals, including his embrace of tariffs to some degree, contradicts free market ethos, and the GOP's social policies, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily in line with a liberty mindset. But by the way, I don't think it would be a good idea to only run opinions in the opinion section that I agree with, that agree with me. That's no fun. Even supporters of freedom and free markets can benefit from reading other perspectives. I take Bezos to mean that the unsigned editorials that come from the paper's perspective will have a new freedom-oriented focus, which is great. Not that every op-ed columnist will be required to adopt such a mindset. If the latter is the case, then I expect many columnists will be following David Shipley out the door. I certainly wouldn't miss Jonathan Capehart, who recently wrote about the, quote, gratitude we owe to Joseph R. Biden Jr. for his inclusive nature and willingness to grow. or Eugene Robinson, who defended Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter, saying he would have done the same for his child. Or Philip Bump, one of the most consistent and desperate defenders of the mainstream media's certainty that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know how that panned out. My favorite WAPO columnist, Jennifer Rubin, has obviously already departed, and so she cannot resign in fury yet again. How sad. So, this was very unexpected news. Jeff Bezos declaring that the Washington Post will adopt like the Robby Soave editorial line. Didn't really see that coming. I don't quite know what to make of it. And, you know, even though I agree with that, I don't necessarily think columnists should be, forced to just do things I agree with, but it is his paper, so he can order that. I don't know. What do you make of it?
Well, we live in a really interesting world right now where billionaires are running media sources. When Donald Trump came into office in 2016, one of the things that he kept talking about, or 2017, was fake news. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to make of this yet. I do think this is going to have a trickle-down effect. I will continue to say trickle-down because what happens at the top will trickle down to the bottom. The question is, how is this going to impact the newsroom at the Washington Post? How is this going to impact the credibility of the news that they're providing? And if you're going to have an editorial page that's only focused on two areas or two things, then I feel like the Washington Post is moving more to a blog stream as opposed to being a credible newspaper.
Yeah, I heard a lot of angry voices from Washington Post writers, but like the Wall Street Journal has news coverage of all varieties, and this is not going to impact the news coverage, he said. But then the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, the unsigned editorials from the Wall Street Journal, are basically in line with the supporting free markets and to some degree at least personal liberties. I don't necessarily agree with their foreign policy as much, but I basically agree with their economic analysis. So it sounds like that's what he wants the Washington Post to do. It is interesting overall to see the move of Bezos and these other tech CEOs to embracing, or if not at least embracing, standing alongside Trump in his inauguration, being more, even if they're not more pro-Trump, they're certainly less willing to play ball with progressives and with Democrats. People have joked that Jeff Bezos, who like me loves The Lord of the Rings, and greenlit a new Lord of the Rings show that was only okay and kind of ruined by, some conservatives would say, woke predilections, has now become super conservative. That's funny.
Why is there such a big issue with using the word woke? And I say this because the opposite of being woke is being asleep. And we're looking at what the Washington Post has and what the Washington Post is doing. We also have to go back to 1972 Watergate. Mm-hmm. The Washington Post became the most credible source of information, along with the New York Times. And then others were feeding off the information that they were getting about what was going on in the Nixon White House. If we don't have a free press, and if we don't have a press where the owners are not pushing what the subject matter is going to be or aligned with the president, I don't necessarily want an owner of a news source to be buddy chum with policymakers. What I want them to do is just give us fair, unfiltered news so that we can look at it and make our own choices based on information and credible sources.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody wants. I think that's what readers of all kinds of types of news are looking for, exactly that. Lots more to come today on Rising. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.